Good evening, my friends and friendly acquaintances. How are you? Good to see you. Firing up a pipe, as usual. Interesting Saturday night. Worked today, came home, took a little bit of a nap, and ate dinner. Then now I'm here. It's good to see you. How's my audio? Audio is good. Great. Good to hear it. Tonight we're going to read some scary stories. Very short ones. Short form stories. Even shorter than Edgar Allan Poe. So we're going to have some fun doing that, and that'll be good. I am looking forward to reading these, probably several. It's probably going to be several stories rather than just one. Artie's Place. For me, it's day 2 of Carnivore. Strict Carnivore. This morning had chicken hearts and fried eggs. For meal number 2, I had just a big hunk of salmon made on the grill. It was great. The bloating has gone down. Everyone's bloated. Let's make something perfectly clear. When you do carnivore, just eat animal-based products for 2 days. By the end of the 2nd day, going into the 3rd day, your pants are going to get looser. You're not going to feel as full. You don't realize how much of a full feeling you already have. Like, most of you are full and don't even realize. You feel a fullness. And for me, it's all going to disappear by tomorrow. So I'm kind of psyched about that. My haul yesterday was some steaks, fish, chicken feet, which I boiled and made, collagen. What else did I get? Well, you saw the video that I did. So I'm pretty psyched. Artie's Place says 61 days on carnivore, 36 pounds. That is amazing. That is amazing. Honest to God. 36 pounds. Artie, what is the goal weight? What do you want to get down to? Or what size pants do you want to fit into? Like, what is the goal? I know you're not doing it just for the heck of it. Is there a goal with the carnivore? AK says not fully carnivore, but down 35 pounds. 1/4 to goal. That's awesome. Tonight in the pipe is Sutliff Holiday Mixture. Now 305, you want to be 270. Wow, Artie. Who would have known? Artie, I never would have known that you were carrying that much weight. Let me put it this way. You carry it well then, my friend. You carry it well. But only you know what you can carry and what's comfortable for you. Yeah. I have some clients, one guy, 400 pounds, and his goal is to get to 260. And that seems like a lot of weight, right? But when you're 400 pounds, getting down to 260 is pretty darn good. So, yeah. Yeah, but Artie, on your videos, I can see it in your face. Seriously. In your videos, I can see it in your face that you lost weight. Even if you didn't tell me you were doing it, I'd be like, man, he looks a little trimmer. So, Eating too much red meat is not bad for you. No, it's not. No, no such thing. So we're going to read some short, scary stories tonight. And Hardy says, I'm heavy all over my legs, carry a lot of weight, have leg ulcer sores. They're gone. Awesome, man. That's awesome, man. You're just going to feel better. I mean, by the end of the year, holy cow. I cut hair 3 days in a row. It was good. Part-time in the mornings. It was good. Cut hair most of the day on Thursday, in the morning yesterday, and in the morning today. Peterson Deluxe Navy rolls. Ooh, I like them. I like them. You love the vapors. Yeah. Got sick of Latakia. Yeah, everybody goes in like little seasons. You go through like a Latakia season. Then you want your barley season, then Virginia season, and yeah, I totally get it. Totally get it. Sugar and carbs will kill you. I know. I know. That was my downfall. Yeah. So let's get reading here. Some horror stories. Scary stories, not necessarily horror. I don't know if people, if horror is the proper term. But let's get rocking and rolling. This one is called The Brown Suit. I never read this before, and I find it quite interesting. A woman came to the funeral parlor to see her husband's corpse. You did a good job, she said to the undertaker. He looks just the way he always looked, except for one thing. My husband always wore a brown suit, but you've dressed him in a blue suit. That's no problem. We can easily change that. When she returned later, her husband was lying in the casket wearing a brown suit. Now he looks just the way he did, she said. I know you went to a lot of trouble to do that. There was no trouble. As it happened, there is a man here who was wearing a brown suit, and his widow felt that the blue would be better. He is about your husband's size, so we gave him the blue one and gave your husband the brown one. Even so, she said, changing all that clothing was a big job. Not really, said the undertaker. All we did was exchange their heads. Pretty wild, huh? Oh, that's a crazy one. That is a crazy one. This one's called Cemetery Soup. On her way home from the market, the woman took a shortcut through the cemetery. There, sticking up out of the ground, she saw a big bone. She picked it up and looked it over carefully. And she said, this will make a really nice soup bone. I think I'll take it home. It's perfect weather for hot soup. When she got home, the first thing she did was start the soup. Into the big soup pot went the water, carrots, green beans, corn, barley, onions, potatoes, and a little bit of beef and some salt and pepper, and the bone. She brought it all to a boil and then brought it down to a simmer. Yum, she said, sniffing it, tasting it. I can hardly wait till supper. Suddenly she heard a small voice. Please, give me back my bone. The woman paid no attention, and then she heard the voice again. May I have back my bone, please? The woman was reading the newspaper, and again she didn't take any notice. In a little while, the voice spoke up once more. It was beginning to sound angry. Give me back my bone. The woman kept on reading the paper. Some people are too impatient, she muttered. Once more the voice spoke. Now it sounded very angry, and it was so loud that the whole house shook. I want my bone back. The woman reached into the pot, grabbed the bone, threw it out the window, and in a voice just as loud, she shouted, "Take it!" There was an eerie silence. Then the woman heard footsteps scurrying away from the house down the road toward the cemetery. And then she got up and served herself some soup. This story is called The Church. There was a fellow named Larry Berger who wasn't afraid of anyone alive, but anyone who was dead scared the wits out of him. One night Larry was out driving in the country in his old Jeep when he got caught in a bad thunderstorm. The rain was coming down in sheets. Since the Jeep didn't have a top on it, he started looking for a place to take shelter. But at the first place he came to, he didn't even slow down. It was an old, deserted cabin, probably as dry as a bone inside, but Larry knew for a fact it was haunted, and he wasn't going to stay there. A few miles further, he came to an old abandoned church, standing all alone in a field that hadn't been used in years. All the window glass was gone, but still it had sections of the roof intact, so Larry parked his Jeep, and he went inside the old abandoned church. It was as dark as could be in there. Larry groped around until he found a pew and sat down. It was nice and dry, just as he thought it would be, and he stretched out his legs and he made himself comfortable. Suddenly, there was a big flash of lightning, and Larry saw that he wasn't the only one in the church. There were people sitting in almost every pew. They all had their heads bowed as if they were praying. They were all dressed in white. These must be ghosts sitting in their shrouds, he thought. They must have come in from some graveyard to get dry. Larry jumped up and ran down the aisle as fast as he could, right smack into one of the ghosts. And the ghost, he went, "Bah!" My dad's friend, Charlie Potter, was a small, nervous man who was always looking around as if he was in some kind of danger. After he told me this story about his college fraternity, I understand why. The frat doesn't even exist anymore, he said. It was banned years ago. We had only 9 members at that point, and were taking in 2 more, Jack Lawton and Ernie Kramer. One night in January, just about this time of year, the 9 of us took them out into the country for their initiation. We took them to an old deserted house where the 2 young men about our age had been murdered recently. Their murderer was still at large. We gave Jack a lighted candle and told him to go up onto the 3rd floor and stay there for an hour. We told him, then come back down and don't speak. Don't make any noise, and if your candle goes out, carry on in the dark. From where we were standing, we could see the light from Jack's candle moving up the stairs to the 2nd floor, then to the 3rd. And when he got to the 3rd floor, the candle went out. We guessed that he had come into a drafty corner and the wind blew it out. But when the hour went by and he didn't come down, we weren't so sure. We waited another 15 minutes and got more and more nervous. So we sent Ernie Kramer up after him. When Ernie got to the 3rd floor, his candle went out. We waited 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and still there was no sign of either one of them. Come on down, we called. But they didn't answer. Finally, we decided to go in and get them. Armed with flashlights, we started up the stairs. It was as quiet and dark as a grave in that house. When we got to the 2nd floor, we called out again, but there was no answer. When we got to the 3rd floor, we walked into a great big open space like an attic. Jack and Ernie were not there. But we saw footprints in the dust. These led to a room on the other side of the attic. That room was also empty. There was fresh blood on the floor, and the window was wide open. It was about 25 feet to the ground. But there was no ladder or rope in sight that they could have used to get down. We searched the rest of the house and the land around the house and found nothing. We decided they were playing a trick on us. We figured that in some way they escaped through the window and were hiding in the woods. The blood on the floor was to throw us off track. We guessed they'd show up the next day with a lot of stories and a lot of laughs, but they didn't. The next day, we told the dean of men what had happened. He reported it to the police. The police didn't find anything either. After several weeks, the search ended. To this day, nobody knows what happened to Jack Lunn and Ernie Kramer. There isn't much more to tell. We weren't arrested, but the college disbanded the fraternity and suspended the 9 of us from school for a year. The strangest part came after we graduated. Someone must have placed a curse on us. Every year since then, around the time of that initiation, one of us has died or gone crazy, and I am the only one left. And I am in pretty good health, but there's times when I just feel a little bit peculiar. Students at the school for nursing got along quite well with one another, except for Alice. The trouble with Alice was that she was perfect. At least that's how it seemed to the other students. She was always friendly and always cheerful. Nothing ever upset her. Her school assignments were always on time and always perfect. She didn't even bite her fingernails. Many of the student nurses resented Alice. They would have liked to see her fail at something, become frightened or cry or do something that showed she had weaknesses like they did. Several night students tried to frighten Alice with a practical joke. They borrowed the hand of a corpse that they had been studying in anatomy class, and they tied it to a light cord in the closet. When she tried to turn on the light, she would find herself holding a dead man's hand. That would scare anybody, one of them said. If it doesn't scare her, nothing will. After tying the hand in place, they went to the movies. When they got back, Alice was sleeping. But when they didn't see her the next morning, they decided to find out what happened. There was no sign of Alice in her room. They soon found her. She was sitting on the floor in her closet, staring at a dead man's hand and mumbling to herself. Alice didn't even look up. The joke had worked, but nobody was laughing. Three old men shared a room at the nursing home. Their room had only one window, but for them it was the only link to the real world. Ted Conklin, who had been there the longest, had the bed next to the window. When Ted died, the man on the next bed, George Best, took his place, and the third man, Richard Green, took George's bed. Despite his illness, George was a cheerful man who spent his days describing the sights he could see from his bed. Pretty girls, policemen on horseback, a traffic jam, a pizza parlor, fire station, and other scenes of life outside. Richard loved to listen to George, but the more George talked about life outside, the more Richard wanted to see it for himself. Yet he knew that only when George died would he have the chance. He wanted to look out that window so badly that one day he decided to kill George. He's going to die soon anyways, he told himself, so what difference does it make? George had a bad heart, and if he had a heart attack during the night, a nurse could not get to him right away. He had pills he could take. He kept them in a bottle on top of the cabinet between his bed and Richard's. All Richard had to do was knock the bottle to the floor where George could not reach it. A few nights later, George died just as Richard planned he would, and the next morning Richard was moved to the bed by the window. Now he would see for himself all the things that George had described. After the nurses left, Richard turned to the window and looked out, but all he could see was a brick wall. Mrs. Briggs was driving to the shopping mall to do some last-minute Christmas shopping when she accidentally ran over a cat. She could not bear to leave the corpse of the cat on the road for other cars to hit. So she stopped, she wrapped the cat in tissue paper and And she put it in an old shopping bag and put it in the back seat. She would bury it in her backyard when she got home. At the mall, she parked her car and began walking to one of the stores. She had only been a few steps when, out of the corner of her eye, she saw a woman reach into the open window of her car and take the shopping bag with the dead cat. The woman quickly got into the car nearby and drove away. Mrs. Briggs ran back to her car and followed the woman. She caught up with her at a diner down the road. She followed her inside and watched the woman slide into a booth and give the waitress an order. As the woman sat sipping her soda, she reached into the shopping bag. Then she bent down and looked inside. A look of horror crossed her face. She screamed and then fainted. The waitress called an ambulance. The two attendants carried the woman away on a stretcher, but they left the shopping bag behind. Mrs. Briggs picked up the bag and ran after them. "This is hers. It's her Christmas present. I'm sure she wouldn't want to lose it." Susanna and Jane shared a small apartment near the university where they were students. When Susanna got back from the library one night, the lights were out and Jane was asleep. Susanna undressed in the dark and quietly got into bed. She had almost fallen asleep when she heard someone humming the tune. "Oh, Susanna." "Jane," she said, "please stop humming. I want to get some sleep." Jane didn't answer, but the humming stopped, and Susanna fell asleep. She awakened early the next morning. Too early. She decided and was trying to get back to sleep when she heard the humming again. "Please, Jane, just go back to sleep. It's too early to get up." Jane didn't answer, but the humming continued. Susanna became angry. "Cut it out," she said. "It's not funny." When the humming still did not stop, she lost her temper. She jumped out of bed, pulled the covers off of Jane, and screamed. Jane's head was gone. Somebody had cut off her head. "I'm having a nightmare," Susanna told herself. "When I wake up, everything's going to be all right." When I wake up, everything will be all right. Ellen had just fallen asleep when she heard a strange voice. "Ellen," it whispered, "I am coming up the stairs. I am on the first step. Now I am on the second step." Ellen got scared and called her parents, but they didn't hear her, and they didn't come. Then the voice whispered, "Ellen, I'm on the top step. Now I am in the hall. Now I am inside your room." Then it whispered, "I'm standing right next to your bed. And then, I've got you." Ellen screamed and the voice stopped. Her father rushed into the room and turned on the light. "Somebody's in here," Ellen said. They looked around, and nobody was there. Somebody was stealing the meat Jed Smith kept in his smokehouse. Every day a ham or some bacon or something else was missing. Finally, Jed decided he had to put a stop to it. One night he hid in the smokehouse with his rifle and waited for the thief. He didn't have to wait for long. For not very long, a black cat came in. It was the biggest cat he had ever seen. When she jumped up and pulled down a ham hanging from the ceiling, Jed grabbed his rifle and turned on the lights. Instead of running away, the cat jumped at him. He fired and shot off one of the paws. Jed was sure he heard a woman scream after his gun went off. The cat began tearing around the room, spitting and yowling. Then she ran up the chimney and was gone. Jed stared at the cat's paw, only it wasn't a cat's paw anymore. It was a woman's foot, lying, wriggling on the floor, all bloody. "So it's a witch," that has been doing it, he told himself. Just then, one of Jed's neighbors, a fellow named Burdick, came racing down the road to get a doctor. His wife's foot had been shot in an accident, he told Jed. She's bleeding. She's bleeding badly. The doctor got to her barely in time. People who were there when it happened said she was spitting and yowling just like a cat. Come on, man. That is creepy. That is creepy. One dark, rainy Saturday afternoon, a fat, jolly butcher named Samuel Blunt had an argument over money with his wife, Eloise. Blunt lost his temper, and he killed his wife. Then he ground her up into sausage and buried her bones under a big flat rock in the backyard. To keep the murder a secret, he told everyone that she had moved away. Blunt mixed his new sausage meat with pork, then seasoned it with salt and pepper, added some sage and thyme and a bit of garlic. To give it a special flavor, he smoked it in his smokehouse for a while, and he called it Blunt's Special Sausage. There was such a demand for this new sausage that Blunt bought the best hogs he could find and started raising his own pork. He also kept a sharp lookout for humans who might make a tasty sausage meat. One day, a plump school teacher came into his shop. Blunt grabbed her and ground her up. Another time, Blunt's dentist came by. He was a little round man, and into the grinder he went. Then one by one, the children in the neighborhood began to disappear, and so did the kittens and the puppies, but no one ever dreamed that Blunt the butcher had anything to do with it. Things went on that way for years. Then one day, Blunt made a big mistake. A fat boy came into the butcher shop. Blunt grabbed him and started to drag him off into the sausage grinder, but the boy broke loose and ran out of the shop. He chased after him, waving a big butcher knife. When the people saw this, they realized at once what became of all the missing children and grown-ups and kittens and puppies. An angry crowd gathered at the butcher shop. No one knows for sure what happened to Blunt that day. Some say he was fed to his hogs. Others say he was fed to his sausage grinder, but he was never seen again, and neither was his wonderful sausage meat. Pretty bizarre. Daisy Clark had been in a coma for more than a month when the doctor said she finally died. She was buried on a cool summer day in a small cemetery about a mile from her home. May she always rest in peace, her husband said, but she didn't. Late that night, a grave robber with a shovel and a lantern began to dig her up. Since the ground was still soft, he quickly reached the coffin and got it open. His hunch was right. Daisy had been buried wearing two valuable rings, a wedding ring with a diamond in it and a ring with a ruby that glowed as if it were alive. The thief got down on his knees, reached into the coffin to get the rings, but they were stuck fast on the fingers. So the only way to get them was to cut off her fingers with a knife. When he cut into the finger of the wedding ring, it began to bleed, and Daisy Clark began to stir. Suddenly she sat up. Terrified, the thief scrambled to his feet. He accidentally kicked over the lantern, and the light went out. He could hear Daisy climb out of the grave. As she moved past him in the dark, he stood there frozen with fear, clutching the knife in his hand. When Daisy saw him, she pulled her shroud around her and said, "Who are you?" When the grave robber heard this corpse speak, he ran. Daisy shrugged her shoulders and walked on, and never once looked back. But in his fear and confusion, the thief fled into the wrong direction. He pitched headlong into her grave, fell on the knife, stabbed himself, while Daisy walked home, and the thief bled to death. This one's called The Bride. The minister's daughter had just gotten married. After the wedding ceremony, there was a great feast with music and dancing and contests and games, even old children's games. When they got to playing a game called hide and seek, the bride decided to hide in her grandfather's trunk up in the attic. They will never find me here, she thought. As she was climbing into the trunk, the lid came down and cracked on her head. She felt unconscious. The lid slammed shut, and it locked. No one will ever know how long she called for help or how hard she struggled to free herself from that tomb. Everyone in the village searched for her, and they looked everywhere, but no one ever thought of looking in the trunk. After a week, her brand new bridegroom and all the others gave up, thinking she was lost. Years later, a maid went up into the attic looking for something she needed. Maybe it's in this trunk. She opened it and screamed. There lay the missing bride in her wedding dress. But by then, she was just a skeleton. Late one night in October of 1864, a Confederate blockade runner slipped by some Union gunboats at the entrance of Galveston Bay in Texas and made it safely to port with its cargo of food and other necessities. Lewis Billings, the master of the small vessel, was getting ready to weigh anchor when he was startled by a shriek from one of the crew. A strange, old-fashioned schooner with a big black flag was rushing down at us. Billings later said she was afire with a sort of a weird pale blue light that lighted up every nook and cranny of her. The crew was pulling at the ropes and doing other work, and they paid us no attention. Didn't even glance our way. They all had ghastly bleeding wounds, but their faces and eyes were those of a dead man. The man who had shrieked fallen to his knees, his teeth chattering as he gasped out a prayer. Overcoming my own terror, I was chilling the very marrow of my bones. I rushed forward, shouting to the others as I ran. Suddenly the schooner vanished before my eyes. Some say it was the ghost of Jean Lafitte's pirate ship, Pride, that sank off of Galveston in 1821. She was seen again in 1892 in the same waters with the same crew. And one last story for tonight. Ida always went to the 7 o'clock Sunday morning service at her church. Usually she heard the clanging of church bells while she was eating breakfast. But this morning she heard them while she was still in bed. Ooh, that means I'm late, she thought. Ida jumped out of bed, quickly dressed, and left without eating or looking at the clock. It was still dark out, but usually it was dark at this time of year. Ida was the only one on the street. The only sounds she heard were the clatter of her shoes on the pavement. Everybody must already be in church, she thought. She took a shortcut through the cemetery, then quietly slipped into the church and found a seat. The service had already begun. When she caught her breath, she looked around. The church was filled with people she had never seen before. But the woman next to her did look familiar. Ida smiled at her. It's Josephine Kerr, she said. But she's dead. She died a month ago. Suddenly, Ida felt very uneasy. She looked around again, and her eyes began to adjust to the dim light, and she saw skeletons in suits and dresses. This is a service for the dead. Everyone here is dead except me. Ida noticed that some of them were staring at her. They looked angry, as if she had no business in there. Josephine Kerr leaned toward her and whispered, "Leave right after the benediction if you care for your life." When the service came to an end, the minister gave his blessing. "The Lord bless you and keep you," he said. "The Lord make his face to shine upon you." Ida grabbed her coat and walked quickly towards the door. When she heard footsteps behind her, she glanced back. Several of the dead were coming for her. Others were getting up to join them. The Lord lift up his countenance to you, the minister went on. Ida was so frightened she began to run. Out of the door she ran with a pack of shrieking ghosts chasing her. Get out! One of them screamed. Another shouted, you don't belong here, and ripped her coat off. She ran through the cemetery. A third grabbed the hat from her head. Don't come back. By the time she reached the street, the sun was rising and the dead had disappeared. Did this really happen? Ida asked herself. Or have I been dreaming? That afternoon, one of Ida's friends brought her coat and hat to her, or what was left of them. It seems they were found in the cemetery, torn to shreds. Scary short stories. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I love reading. I love reading to you. As I like to say, read to people that you love. My favorite story out of all those was we just exchanged heads. Oh, now that's creepy, right? My husband usually wears a brown suit. Oh, we'll take care of that. How'd you do that so fast? We just exchanged the heads. Come on, man. That is scary. Now that's scary. That was scary. I am now putting Missouri Pride in a corncob pipe. We'll see how that goes. So I like smoking a pipe and reading scary stories. That's what I like to do. I used to do this with my kids a lot, quite often. I loved getting read to. My mom used to read to me quite often. But I'm the only reader in my family. Nobody in my family reads except my mother and me. Dad doesn't read. My brothers don't read. I read. I don't even think my brothers have ever read a book in their whole life. Let alone a magazine. But I have been, I practice what I preach when I say that, spin plates. Go ahead and spin plates as long as one of those plates is you. That's super important, that you become a plate that you spin. I think it's important that you do that. That you become a means of your own entertainment and don't rely on other people. I think that's important. So, did I ever listen to the late Jesuit priest Anthony DeMello? No, I don't even know the name at all. Don't even know the name. I love reading scary stories. I love I love 10 wind-up toys that just start playing. I like music boxes. I like rocking chairs that rock themselves. I love that stuff. Yep. Is it dark out? Yeah, it is. It's actually dark out. I'm going to turn on this light here. Take away the shroud. Ah, there we go. Much better. So it is a nice night to read scary stories. It's not too cold out yet. I I do know why we dress up at Halloween. Yes, I do. Yep. It's good. It's good to see everybody. It is. This lighter is it's a copy of an old-fashioned lighter where you just kind of flip this top, and then there's a little flint wheel in the front. So you flip the top, hit the flint wheel, and it's a soft flame that comes out of the side. It's like an old Corona copy. That's what it is. Probably works better than an actual old Corona, I think. You know? Lord of the Red Pills, what do you think about the public schools turning into feminist, totalitarian, intersectional gay supremacist camps funded by the bureaucracy of the United States government, paid by our tax dollars? That's a real horror story right there. That's scarier than these stories, you know? Oh, this is really nice. Missouri Pride. I really like this. Michael McVeigh says I ordered some tobacco from the United States, some we don't get here in Ireland, half and half. Seattle Pipe Club plum pudding and McBaron Old Dark Fired. Oh, Michael. And you got a country gentleman and added a Danish stem. Well, this right here is I forget what they call this, like a general or something like that, with a Danish stem, and I can take that off pretty easily, and I can add it to a country gentleman. Let me see if I can. Like this. Danish stem, country gentleman. Like that. Perfect smoker. Absolutely perfect. Will last you virtually forever. Virtually forever. It really will last you for a long, long time. Let's fire this up again. My ember went out. Nothing like smoking a pipe on a Saturday night. is nice. Although I am getting kind of a creepy feeling now that I've been reading all these scary stories. Like it literally just sometimes it's scary out here, I think. Tim Robinson, why is Charlie McCarthy moving behind you? I don't see anything. I don't know. Maybe the creepiness of Halloween and reading scary stories, maybe it's like making you think that things are moving, you know? Maybe it's making you think that there's like you're seeing things, you know what I mean? It's like the like expectation where, you hear scary stories and it kind of plants that into your head, that there's things moving. There's this one pipe I want to show you. Hold on. This is called a devil's ants, and it's a shorty. It's a shorty pipe. And many times, if the beard gets too big when I light this thing, it literally will, I could feel it kind of igniting a beard hair or two, the smell of like burnt hair. It's creepy. It's very creepy. But that's why I tend to like a pipe where the bowl is a little further away from my face. What a perfect night. It's a little chilly out, just a little bit, not enough to wear a jacket. I have the Irish linen shirt on, which I love, uh, kind of like that low grandpa collar, which you can hardly see. Uh, but it's nice. It doesn't mess with the beard and has just like a million buttons all the way down. I like it. It's kind of cool. I think I'm going to get myself like one that's kind of like off white, and I want to get a black one. It's warm, it's comfortable, it fits well. You know, did you hear something? Hearing things. Yeah, it is a perfect night for haunted bookshop, isn't it? You know what? I haven't had haunted bookshop cake. Oh, I still have it here. I am going to fire up some haunted bookshop cake as soon as I'm done with this one. That's kind of exciting. Hold on, let me get some of that stuff. I think how perfect for reading scary stories. Haunted bookshop, right? How perfect is that? Mm, and the smell is amazing. Wow. Love it. Love it. I can't wait to fire that up. And what will I put that in? Probably, most likely, the Savinelli 673, which is paying respect to John Hardin. Matches 860. If you guys haven't subscribed to his channel, it's called Matches 860. And the guy is an absolute legend in the pipe smoking world. Absolute legend. And sometimes I feel like whenever I whenever I smoke haunted bookshop in a 673, which was his favorite tobacco and his favorite pipe, sometimes I feel like I'm channeling John. Sometimes I feel like just John is here whenever I smoke that, you know? It's weird. It's really weird. Whenever I puff on that tobacco, I just think like John is here. Hmm. Ted says, I remember Tom Selleck sometimes wore those low collar shirts back in the 80s on Magnum PI, and they've looked cool to me ever since. Yeah. I put in the video that I did, a day or two ago, I put a link for it, and they got different colors, but I'm going to get one that's black and get one that's kind of like off white. It's not white like my beard. It would be more of it's not beige, but it's not like sheet of paper white. Yeah. Yeah. I really like them. And I think this is going to end up being kind of like my winter shirt. I mean, you can unbutton it. I haven't wore it yet with a sport coat. The weird thing about the buttons is the holes are horizontal. So you have to kind of, takes a little bit more effort to unbutton, but they look good buttoned all the way up. Ah, where is it? And they look good unbuttoned a little bit, like down a little bit. So, you can just kind of wear them kind of like this, a little bit like that. And that looks good too. But it's still, the collar doesn't come up to mess with your beard, you know? The closer we get to Halloween and the more scary stories that I read, the more I get into a kind of a Vincent Price mood. I got a great Vincent Price story. My friend, Steve, who is friends with the Sinatra family, Frank Sinatra. He was the ring bearer in Frank Sinatra's wedding. True story. He was the ring bearer in Frank Sinatra's wedding when Frank married Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner, Steve tells me, is the most beautiful woman that he's ever seen in his life. Now, Steve has been married a million years, okay? And to this day, he still says Ava Gardner was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, ever. Now, Steve was a cameraman for a TV station. And in the 1960s, the station had a kind of a chiller theater kind of show, like a scary Friday night show. And Vincent Price was hired to be the host of this scary show. So they shot several shows one after another. It got to be pretty late at the studio. There was no one left in the studio, just like the cameraman. And, you know, it was like literally a skeleton crew. Just that sounds scary, doesn't it? Oh, I love waxed canvas clothes. I have a waxed canvas shirt and a waxed canvas baseball cap that are just incredible. Incredible. They fit so well. Just so well. So the story is this. They're working late one night, and Vincent Price, all he had to do was he basically filmed the beginning of the show, and they had a set that was kind of scary with scary things and like skeletons and ravens and vines growing over things. And then Vincent would introduce a scary movie. And then during the commercials, it would cut back to Vincent Price. And it was like a Philadelphia local version of chiller theater. And one night they're shooting, and it got to be late, 9, 10 o'clock at night. Nobody else was in the studio. Vincent Price was staying at a hotel near the TV station. And those of you that are in Philadelphia, you know Channel 6 was near the Adams Mark Hotel, where a lot of celebrities would stay, because it was literally just one block away from the TV station. When they got done shooting, Vincent Price says to Steve, "Is there any place to eat around here?" And this is back when their things didn't stay open very late. And Steve was thinking, he says, "No, everything's closed." And he says, "If you're hungry," he says, "just hold on a second." Steve called his wife, Peg. Peg and Steve are friends of mine. Steve called his wife, Peg, and said, "Honey, I'm going to be home in a little while. Can you put out another place setting in the dining room?" She said, "Sure. No problem." He says, "I'm just going to be bringing someone home." And he brought Vincent Price home with him. And he had dinner. Vincent Price had dinner at Steve's house with Steve and his wife. And Steve and Vincent Price were friends right up until the time that Vincent Price died. how much of a trip is that? Especially for Peg. Steve comes in, "Hi, honey, I'm home," and right behind him is Vincent Price. Now, is that creepy? And they had dinner and laughed and clinked wine glasses and all that stuff. And then Steve brought him back to the hotel, dropped him off, and they became friends after that. Imagine that. True story. Late 60s, early 70s. Yep. True story. Peg met Steve, and she had a 16-year-old boy when they met. She was a single mom. This is going back. This is going back many, many years. I'm talking 50, 60 years. And her son was killed in a car accident. And that really had an effect, obviously, on her and Steve. But obviously, to this day, she still carries, the grief from it. I don't know, just keep hearing things. Wow. Missouri Pride tobacco in a cob. How perfect. Seriously, how perfect. I am out here with nothing to drink, nothing to wet my whistle, nothing. Wait, I have a little, maybe I have a little water left. Not a lot. I got to refill my little water jug. Hmm. I thought I had a bottle of water out here. Could be wrong. Hold on a second. Let me find that water. Hold on. Yes, my soda stream had it on the shelf. I wonder if it's still fizzy. Ah, there we go. Excellent. I always like to have something to sip on, whether it be like seltzer water or something like that. Mm. You know what I'm going to put in it? Some bitters. People think I'm crazy, but even, oh boy, hold on a second. Bitters, like you put in an old fashioned, put a few drops in, you put a few drops in seltzer water, and it's just magnificent. It's very, very subtle. Mix it around a little bit. Yeah, nice. Just enough to wet your whistle. That's good. That is good. Always have a bottle of bitters in your house. Always. The Tingler is on Me TV tonight. Oh, the Tingler is such a creepy movie. It really is. How many have ever seen the Tingler with Vincent Price? How many have you ever seen that? They actually had in the theaters things that would move under the seats, and whenever the Tingler came on the screen, there were things that moved. Back when theaters were kind of a fun place to go. Did you ever see the Tingler? Raise your hand. Raise your hand if you've ever seen the Tingler. Raise your hand. Good. Very, very good. Yeah, it's good stuff. Fans of Vincent Price here? Do you guys like Vincent Price? I posted a video where he read The Raven. I posted it on the community section of the YouTube channel. Any fans of Vincent Price here? Good stuff. I love this one picture of. Have you ever seen the? Have you ever seen the one picture of Vincent Price, kind of like slow dancing with a skeleton, and he has that look on his face? Have you ever seen that picture? It's a classic Hollywood promo picture. Have you ever seen that picture? Yeah, pretty wild. he was the perfect horror host, wasn't he? You know, he was the perfect horror host. The way he spoke, the way he read stories was. I'm trying to think of the accent that he had. You know, it was an interesting accent, right? I have one friend, an actress, who knew I was a fan of Vincent Price, and I would see her every month at a networking event, and she used to hear me talking about Vincent Price all the time. I was a huge fan. You've seen me with my Vincent Price shirt on and all. I have this whole series of shirts with like H.P. Lovecraft, Vincent Price, who else? H.P. Uh, Edgar Allan Poe. Who else? Bram Stoker. It's kind of like Masters of Horror kind of thing. These T-shirts, and it's one of these. Whenever I wear these shirts, like into a supermarket, you want to talk about wearing something that people will literally reach out to you. You're just pushing a shopping cart, and people will stop and say, "I like your shirt. That's really cool." Whether I'm wearing Poe or I'm wearing Vincent Price or H.P. Lovecraft or H.G. Wells or Bram Stoker, people love talking about things like that. I don't know why. So sometimes I wear like that T-shirt out and about. I don't know. I always thought puppets were scary. Puppets and marionettes. Like marionettes just hanging on their strings. Clowns are scary. Rocking chairs that rock themselves. Music boxes that just start playing all by themselves, right? Merry-go-rounds that just start turning, like carnival music. I always thought carnival music was scary, especially like that. What what is that? What is that organ type of instrument? It's creepy. You know what I'm talking about? It's it's a type of organ that plays on a carousel. To me, I think that's scary. It's not a pipe organ. There's a name for it. Puppet Master movie was horrifying, very horrifying. Like I God, there's a movie. It'll come to me. It was on Netflix. Just pure horror, all puppets. Do you remember Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea? Do you remember the when the all the crew members on the submarine were starting to be replaced by puppets? Remember that? And who was the captain of the ship? Remember the actor's name? I believe it was Richard Basehart. Remember that? And he encountered the puppet that looked exactly like him. Now that's creepy. That is creepy. Remember seeing that? women with lots of makeup and perfume. It's like a mask, right? Kind of. It's not a hurdy-gurdy, not a hurdy-gurdy, not a barrel organ, but it was pretty darn. It, it's a classic. It's a classic carousel organ kind of thing. Thea says a calliope. Yep, that's what it was. I used to like Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Lost in Space, The Land That Time Forgot, Land of the Lost. Remember Land of the Lost? Well, I think it's time for some Haunted Bookshop. How perfect. Haunted Bookshop in a Savinelli 673. That'll be my last pipe of the night. There actually is a essay called The Last Pipe. And I'm not sure if it's by Christopher Morley or James Barrie. I forget. I'm trying to think. Will someone look that up? It's called The Last Pipe. That's pretty cool. Yes, Haunted Bookshop in a 673 conjures up John Hardin, the OG of pipe smoking. It's as if he isn't even dead anymore. It's weird. I mean, he died maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It's weird. I thought I heard something. I usually hold my pipe with my left hand and I puff it on the left side of my mouth. Some guys put the pipe in the middle of their mouth. It doesn't fit for me. So, like on the side, like that. What are you guys talking about? What's this? Thea, are you calling me a dummy? Man, I'm really liking this haunted bookshop. It just, holy cow. It is just haunted bookshop cake is so good. So good. Mm. Well, you had a lot of choices tonight, all over YouTube, and you chose to spend a few minutes with me. And for that, I am thankful. So when you get a chance, read to those that you love.